Right, let's learn how to draw curly hair for pet portraits properly. So this is not just some little like trick, like I'm going to show you how to do it and then it only works for this reference photo. This is actually how you draw curly hair for any type of reference photo, because like all of my techniques, they are built on theory. So when you understand why something works, you can figure out how to do it. So this is a longer process in terms of you need to start learning all of these different techniques. But then when you do, you'll be able to draw curly fur really easily every single time. So what I often see when people come to draw curly fur is they'll take their colours. And for this tutorial, I'm not too worried about getting the colours bang on. This is just a case of trying to show you the technique. And they'll go, right, okay, I've got a nice little curl here. So I'm going to do a curl like that. And then it's a little bit lighter here. And then they're going to go and draw another curl. And they just keep working in this kind of way. Obviously, I'm being quite messy here as well. But the point is, they approach the curls as individual areas. And this, unfortunately, isn't going to work very well. This is what you end up with. You end up with something that doesn't actually look like anything, let alone fur. It's really difficult to join it together. It's really difficult to stop it looking particularly thick, and this almost looks like it's solid, certainly not like it's curly. Or you get people that will draw lots and lots of individual curls. They could be looking at a reference photo to try and get some ideas from it maybe, and then again they're going to go in and say, okay, this bit's lighter, these bits are lighter, and oh dear, it's not looking like curly fur again. So while this has a little bit more movement than these very almost like set curls over here, while this has more movement, the main issue you're going to have when people draw curls in this sort of way is that they don't describe the form underneath it. So they're not describing the different planes on the head of the dog or the cat or whatever they're drawing. And so by the time they finish the drawing, all of these curls, where they might give you quite a bit of texture, your actual drawing ends up looking quite flat because you can't tell where the snout is coming out, where the head is curving around to the side planes from the front plane, and it becomes really confusing, and it'll often become quite messy as well. So neither of those techniques are easy to work with or will yield you particularly professional results either. So how I approach drawing curls, instead of taking it as I'm drawing a literal curl on the paper, I look at my reference photo. So again, let's bring the reference photo back up. And I start off looking for the colours beneath the top layer of fur. Now this is important because if you blur your eyes at the image, instead of seeing individual pin curls on the screen, what you're going to be left with is gentle areas of dark, mid-tone and highlights. So if you blur your eyes, you lose detail. But at the same time, it still looks like textured curly fur. So that is what I do. I work towards the tones and I pay strict attention to my edge management. So edge management, just quickly for you, is if I were to put down a darker tone here and then a lighter tone right next to it, that is a fairly hard edge. However, if I were to put down that darker tone again, and then put down my mid-tone next to that, and then start to blend the two together. And I have a tutorial on blending pastel pencils if you want more detail on this. Then we've created a softer edge there. It's a softer transition. And I know this might sound really obvious, but when you get stuck into your drawings, it's so easy to forget these principles. And that is how you end up drawing like this instead. Instead of thinking about painting with your pastel pencils and creating and describing form and shape, you get stuck into details and it becomes very flat, formulaic. And by the end, you've not got a realistic result if that is what you're after. So I'm just going to be drawing a cross-section of this photo, and what you'll notice is I do not draw it like for like. I think this is the biggest problem people encounter when they're doing curls. They try to mimic every single little curl that they can see in the reference photo, which is incredibly difficult. and again can end up with your drawings looking like this as you really try and force all of the curls into your shape. They become quite stiff and it will look forced. So instead I look for the general flow of an area. So if you look above the eyebrows at the minute, you can see how the fur moves over the eyebrows. It's showing the eye socket there and how the eye socket is curving around towards the side plane of the head. So that is incredibly important to get into your pet portrait. You don't have to do it exactly as you see it on the photo, but it's a movement that you want to be getting in. And the general light around there as well. On the right hand side, it's picking up a warm direct light. So you know you're going to need more of your warm direct highlight for that area. Okay. So I'm looking for the colour beneath the top layer of fur first. This is all really, really gentle. So I'm just picking up the 182 for this. I'm working just on a piece of scrap paper here. This is still Clairefontaine pastel mats. I fully advise using Clairefontaine pastel mat for all of your pastel paintings because it makes your life so much easier. So I'm just going to use the pencil on the side. You could use any colour of pastel mat for this. This is just a piece I had. I tend not to use the brown very much as well. So it's good for practicing on. And I'm using the pencil on the side so that I'm getting a really nice soft application. It's a lovely golden colour, the 182. I use it a lot, especially for blonde dogs. So as I said, I'm just doing a little sample for you, if you like, so you can see how the technique comes together for this. So I wouldn't look for your darkest dark, but I'd look for your, I would call it a mid-dark, if there is such a thing. So it's lighter than your mid-tone, but not as dark as the deepest shadows. Because again, if you look back at the photo, and you'll find this with most photos that have curly fur, the lighting is really soft, the transitions, they're like this. They are nice and soft. So I'm not going to start with the very darkest. Now the mid-tones, which is arguably where a lot of the detail is for the curls, they are super soft and quite non-descriptive. It's in fact the highlights and then the few pockets of dark here and there that are going to give this its main structure. So I tend to be quite free and relaxed when I'm doing my midtones. I'm going to use the Bister for this. As I said, I'm not looking at trying to get my colours bang on for this. I'm trying to show you how I create movement. So I'm looking at an area sort of in the centre of his forehead or her forehead. And what I do is I look for general movement. Now, I'm not pressing super hard like I did over there where I was literally drawing curls, and I'm just starting to create some shapes. Now, the biggest difference here is that I've already got something underneath the curls that I'm starting to add on top of. So instead of ending up with lots of curls that don't sit next to each other and knit together, all of this is sat on my underpainting area. Obviously, if you were doing the whole dog, you would probably need to nuance your underpainting from slightly lighter to slightly darker, which you see me doing in my pet portraits. So let's see, there's some nice shapes that I can start to mimic. There's a few areas of curly fur, more wavy curly fur that are all seeming to originate from sort of one place. To be nice and soft, sweep it on and off the page, and that way your curls can start to appear out of the mid-tone instead of going on as a definite shape. Here I am, which will make it really, really rigid and very, very difficult to hold together with the rest of the drawing. So if you're looking at the photo, and I'll try and zoom in on this cross section, you can see I am not copying it exactly, not at all. Instead, I'm just looking for general movement at the minute, some little almost inspiration for the pattern that I'm putting down. But it's already starting to feel quite natural. I have to say that I absolutely love drawing curly fur, partly because of this. It's very freeing. You haven't got to focus exactly on what's in front of you and recreate it in perfect imagery. Instead, we can have a little bit of fun. So I'd say for your curls, the theory that you need to be paying most attention to and putting most practice into is tone, light and dark. That's what I'm looking at. So I'm actually just pressing slightly harder where the curls are catching the light a little bit more. It's starting to give it a little bit of form and shape. So if you needed to, I've been quite soft so it's okay, but if you needed to, you could go back in with your original underpainting tone here. use the pencil very, very lightly on the side, and you can just help the start of each curl melt away into the shadow. As I said, most of mine's already quite soft, but when you're a beginner, it can be very difficult to properly control every single stroke, so that's how you would go in and fix that. Okay, so with that very basic shape in, I'm going to take my next tone, and I'm just using a grey for this. It's the, what's it, 270. Now I'm looking at my reference photo and I'm starting to see where's lighter and where's darker. So this generally is going to be from the midsection to the tip of the curls as they come out into the light, but of course some curls come up and then head back into the main section of fur. So you want to be super soft with your pencil for this. If you're not soft, what is going to happen is we've got a nice curl, say, sweeping around, and then I come in with my highlight and I go like this. And it doesn't look right. It's going to be really hard to make that become part of the original shape. We want all of this just to melt together. As I said, I'm just doing a sample here, but I will have put some photos on the screen of pet portraits that I've done with fur like this. This is from a cockapoo, and you can see how the effect becomes really realistic, despite the fact that I'm not following absolutely every detail I can see. So I really do take inspiration from what I can see on the screen, such as, oh, there's some highlights here that are slightly split up, where the fur isn't sat in its like little clump. But I'm always trying to make sure that I'm being really soft. Starting to add a few strands as well. It's not all sat in clumps, but try not to head over towards this. That is so easily done, and instead of having curls, you just end up with random shapes that are squiggling all over the place. And again, you're going to lose that overall form, which is so important to make your dog look 3D. Now, I tend to add a little bit of pink when I'm doing light blonde fur. This is actually a Caran pencil, 042. It's not sharp simply because, unfortunately, the lead is actually broken here. But I love these pencils so much, I'm not willing to throw that bit of lead away yet. So I'm just being really, really soft with this. Just tones down some of the yellow by going in with a peachy pink. So where's the lightest areas? And as I work, I start to look at the reference photo a little bit less because my work takes on a life of its own effectively. Obviously, you need to keep in mind the overall lighting for this, but it becomes easier and easier to see the textures that you're creating as you add more. Okay, so we've got quite a good little effect coming together here. So now I'm going to go in with a slightly darker tone. In this case, I've just picked out the 283. And again, using the photo for a little bit of inspiration and making sure that I'm being super light, that is the theme for this, I'm going to make some patches a little bit darker. And of course, what this is going to do is give us depth, but you must be really soft with this because again, if you blur your eyes at the photo, all of the tones melt together to form these textures really, really well. As soon as we start to become too rigid with our mark making, as soon as we forget to paint instead of draw, that's when we're in a bit of trouble. And the whole curl effect becomes incredibly difficult to bring back to life and will start to be quite flat. Okay, so I'm just going to make this bit here darker still. This can help you to give a little bit of definition. I'm careful to use the word definition because especially when you're starting out, you'll very quickly end up back over here again. But of course, some curls do have more definition than others. Again, I'm going to go with the 182 because that's the tone just above the darkest shadow, the 283 that I've used, and just make sure that that is really softly blended in. So when I'm drawing this en masse and I'm doing the whole pet portrait, I would put the underpainting in first. In this case, because I'm doing a swatch, if you like, I just use one tone. But as I said, you have got planes on the dog's head, and if the light, for example, is coming in from the right hand side, then the left hand side of the dog's face is going to be darker, so I would use more dark tones in there. And then I would go in, as I have done, with a general mid-tone to give myself some curly structures to start working with, making sure it's soft. Work back over the top with your underpainting pencils if you need to, and then start to bring out the highlights. And then generally, once the highlights have started to go in, that's when I put in the shadows. You just don't want to overdo it because they can become really stiff. So I've saved my lightest light for last. In this case, it's the 203 from Faber Castell, which is an ivory. And this is where I actually draw the markings more like fur. And again, this can all be melted very softly back in. Gives the chance for a few details to go on top. It stops these shapes being in total isolation and pulls them together even more. So this is very similar to drawing whiskers, although you don't want to be pressing as hard, in that you need quite a sure hand. You can see I move the pencil really, really quickly. These don't need to be perfect. The fur is quite wiry. It's very, very natural. So drawing a perfect curve that you take ages over, like so, is not going to be right. However, if you go in nice and swiftly, we've got movement. It looks like the wind is catching the fur. It also means that the ends are super wispy, which is exactly what we have in the photo. I'm just making a few areas a little bit lighter. And when I'm doing this on a real pet portrait, I spend quite a lot of time on this. I'd be picking up my other pencils that I've gone through. So I've got my grey here, which I'd probably use on the left-hand side of this dog because the light's coming in from the right. So the left-hand side, if you look at the photo, it's a little bit more grey. The light is making the fur warmer on the right-hand side. So, I'd go in, nuance that, add a bit more warmth to the right-hand side with something like this Caran dash or another pink. And you'd then really start to get good dimension. And there you can see the curly fur is really starting to look like it's moving. So obviously this is just a small cross section, but what it shows you is how you can use tone to insinuate detail. I haven't sat there for hours building up lots and lots and lots of tiny little markings like this, because if I did this, I would never get to something like that. It just can't emulate the 3D form that we need for the finished pet portrait. So I hope you found this useful. I would definitely try this photograph first with a selection of pencils like so and see how you get on. Remember to keep your mark making really soft and fluid. I think fluid is the key word when it comes to doing curls. And then once you've done that, what I would definitely suggest is you find another photo, similar fur, but find another photo and give it a go yourself, because again, this isn't about learning one technique to do just this type of fur. This is about learning how light, colour and form all come together and how you can use the knowledge of that to draw anything that's placed in front of you. So really start to get to grips with your edge management for curls. You don't want anything too rigid because it won't look like curls by the end. So whatever you'd like to see next, please let me know in the comments. This video has come from the request of another viewer, so I'm definitely up for filming more of what you guys want to see, and I hope you found this useful. Until next time, happy drawing.